In a small, quiet town where everyone knew each other's business, Daniel Harper lived a life that was far from ordinary. He wasn't the kind of man who sought attention or craved drama. Instead, he preferred simplicity, working as an accountant during the day and tending to his garden in the evenings. Life had dealt him a heavy blow years ago when his wife passed away after a long battle with illness. Since then, Daniel had been alone, navigating the world without the person who once filled his home with warmth and laughter. Despite the loneliness, Daniel had always felt there was something missing, a purpose beyond himself. That changed one rainy afternoon when he decided to volunteer at the local foster care center. It wasn't something he planned, it just happened. A coworker mentioned how they were short on volunteers, and Daniel thought it might be nice to do something meaningful with his free time. Little did he know, this decision would alter the course of his life forever. The foster care center was a modest building tucked away on the outskirts of town. Inside, the walls were painted cheerful colors, but the atmosphere carried a weight of sadness. Many of the children there had faced unimaginable hardships, abandonment, neglect, abuse, and their eyes told stories no child should have to live through. As Daniel walked through the halls, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the mix of emotions swirling around him. Some kids clung to stuffed animals like lifelines, while others sat silently, staring off into space. It was in one of the playrooms that Daniel first met Marcus and Elijah. The two brothers stood out immediately, not because of their appearance, but because of the way they interacted with each other. Marcus, the older brother, was protective and watchful, always keeping an eye on Elijah, who seemed shy and reserved. They reminded Daniel of how he used to look out for his younger sister when they were growing up. There was something about their bond that tugged at his heartstrings. At first, Daniel didn't think much of it. He figured volunteering would simply be a way to pass the time and maybe make a difference in someone's life. But every week he found himself drawn back to the foster care center, specifically to Marcus and Elijah. Over time, he began learning more about them. Marcus loved basketball and dreamed of playing professionally someday. Elijah, on the other hand, had a talent for drawing and could spend hours sketching pictures of animals and landscapes. Despite their differences, the brothers shared a deep connection that made it clear they belonged together. As weeks turned into months, Daniel started thinking about adoption. It wasn't a decision he took lightly. He knew the challenges ahead. Raising two boys on his own wouldn't be easy, especially since they came from a background so different from his own. And then there was the fact that he was white, while Marcus and Elijah were black. In a town where people held onto outdated beliefs and traditions, Daniel worried about how the community might react. Would they accept him? More importantly, would they accept the boys? But the more time Daniel spent with Marcus and Elijah, the clearer it became that he couldn't walk away. These boys needed stability, love, and someone who believed in them. And if Daniel could provide that, why shouldn't he? So, after months of deliberation and countless conversations with social workers, he made the decision to adopt them. It wasn't just about giving them a home, it was about creating a family. When news of Daniel's plan spread through the town, reactions were mixed. Some people praised him for his generosity and courage. "That takes a lot of heart," one neighbor said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Others weren't as kind. At the grocery store, Daniel overheard whispers about how he doesn't know what he's getting into or those boys will never fit in here. Even members of his church congregation raised eyebrows, questioning whether adopting across racial lines was the right thing to do. The criticism stung, but what hurt the most was seeing how it affected Marcus and Elijah. When they went out in non-tien public, people stared. Sometimes they heard unkind comments muttered under breaths. One particularly painful moment came during a school event when another parent loudly remarked, "I don't understand why he thinks this is a good idea." Daniel tried to shield the boys from these moments, but it wasn't always possible. Still, he refused to let negativity define their lives. Every night, he reminded Marcus and Elijah that they were loved, valued, and worthy of happiness. Deep down, Daniel knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that love wasn't supposed to be easy. It required sacrifice, patience, and resilience. And as he looked at Marcus and Elijah sitting at the dinner table, laughing over a silly joke, he realized he wouldn't trade this messy, imperfect family for anything in the world. After all, family wasn't about matching last names or skin tones. It was about choosing to stand by someone no matter what. And Daniel had chosen to stand by Marcus and Elijah come what may. Life in the small town hadn't been easy for Daniel Harper even before he adopted Marcus and Elijah. But after the adoption became official, things took a turn for the worse. The whispers that had once lingered quietly in the background grew, louder, more frequent, and far crueler. People who had once smiled at Daniel on the street now crossed to the other side when they saw him coming. Neighbors stopped inviting him to barbecues and holiday gatherings. Even some of his closest friends began to distance themselves, unsure of how to handle the uncomfortable tension that seemed to follow him wherever he went. At first, Daniel tried to brush off the negativity. He told himself it didn't matter what others thought, that their opinions couldn't change the love he felt for Marcus and Elijah, or the bond they were building as a family. But ignoring the criticism wasn't as simple as it sounded. Everywhere he turned, there were reminders of how different his life had become. At church, where he used to find comfort and community, people whispered behind hymnals and exchanged disapproving glances. One Sunday morning, an elderly woman approached him after the service with a forced smile. "You're brave," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But are you sure this is what God wants for you?" The comments weren't limited to adults. Children could be just as cruel, if not more so. When Marcus and Elijah started school, they quickly became targets of teasing and exclusion. On the playground, other kids refused to let them join games, calling them names or pretending they didn't exist. During lunch, they often sat alone at the far end of the cafeteria, picking at their food while classmates laughed and chatted nearby. It broke Daniel's heart to see his boys treated this way, but he knew he couldn't shield them from everything. All he could do was remind them every day that they were smart, talented, and deserving of respect, no matter what anyone else said. The hardest moments came during parent-teacher conferences and school events. These were supposed to be opportunities for families to come together and celebrate their children's progress. For Daniel, however, they were battlegrounds of judgment and prejudice. Once, at a PTA meeting, another father openly questioned whether Marcus and Elijah belonged in the same schools as everyone else. His words hung heavy in the air, silencing the room. Daniel clenched his fists under the table, fighting the urge to respond. Instead, he focused on keeping his composure for the sake of his boys who deserved better than to see their father lose his temper over ignorance. Despite the hostility, Daniel refused to give up. He threw himself into being the best father he could be, determined to prove the doubters wrong. Every evening, he helped Marcus practice basketball drills in the driveway, cheering him on as he perfected his jump shot. Inside, he encouraged Elijah to keep drawing, framing his artwork and hanging it proudly on the walls of their home. Together, the three of them spent weekends exploring parks, visiting museums, and trying new recipes in the kitchen. Laughter filled their house, creating a warmth that countered the coldness outside. But no matter how much joy they found within their little family, the outside world continued to intrude. Grocery shopping became an ordeal. Strangers would stare at Daniel, Marcus, and Elijah as they walked down the aisles, their eyes lingering just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Cashiers sometimes hesitated before ringing up their items, as if unsure how to interact with such an unconventional trio. Once, while waiting in line at the checkout counter, a man loudly remarked to his wife, "I guess blood doesn't matter anymore, huh?" Daniel bit his tongue, gripping the cart tightly until his knuckles turned white. Behind him, Marcus tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Dad, can we leave?" It wasn't just strangers who made life difficult. Friends Daniel had known for years began pulling away, unable or unwilling to support his decision. Some claimed they were worried about how hard it would be for Marcus and Elijah to grow up in a predominantly white town. Others hinted that Daniel was setting himself up for failure by taking on two boys with such complicated backgrounds. A few even suggested that he might have ulterior motives, questioning why a single man would choose to adopt two black children instead of starting fresh with a normal family. The most painful rejection came from Daniel's own brother, Robert. Growing up, the two had been inseparable, sharing secrets and adventures throughout childhood. Now Robert barely spoke to him. When Daniel invited him over for dinner one evening, hoping to mend their strained relationship, Robert showed up reluctantly and left early, muttering something about how this isn't natural. As Daniel stood on the porch watching his brother drive away, he felt a pang of loneliness sharper than anything he'd experienced since losing his wife. Through it all, Marcus and Elijah bore the brunt of the backlash. Though Daniel did his best to protect them, they weren't blind to the way people treated them differently. Marcus, ever the protector, tried to hide his hurt behind a tough exterior, throwing himself into sports and academics to prove his worth. Elijah, on the other hand, retreated into his art, using crayons and markers to express emotions he couldn't put into words. Both boys carried the weight of being outsiders, yet they refused to let it break them. One night, after a particularly rough day at school, Elijah curled up on the couch next to Daniel, clutching a sketch pad close to his chest. "Dad," he asked softly, "why don't they like us?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair as he searched for the right words. "It's not about you or Marcus," he finally said. "Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand. They see us, a white dad and two black sons, and it makes them uncomfortable because it's not what they're used to. But that doesn't mean we're wrong, okay? We're doing something special here. Something important." Elijah nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in his big brown eyes. Daniel pulled him closer, holding him tight as if to shield him from the harshness of the world. In that moment, he vowed to fight harder, not just for Marcus and Elijah, but for every child who deserved a loving home, regardless of race, background, or circumstance. Yes, the road ahead would be rocky, and yes, there would be days when it felt like the whole world was against them. But Daniel knew one thing for certain: love was stronger than hate. And as long as he had Marcus and Elijah by his side, he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the months turned into years, Daniel Harper's little family began to find its rhythm. Life wasn't perfect, far from it, but there was a sense of growth, resilience, and determination that filled their home. Daniel poured every ounce of his energy into raising Marcus and Elijah, determined to give them the tools they needed to navigate a world that often seemed stacked against them. The boys, in turn, brought light and laughter into his life, proving time and again that love could bloom even in the harshest conditions. One of the first things Daniel did was enroll Marcus and Elijah in activities that would help them discover their passions. For Marcus, basketball became more than just a hobby. It was an escape, a way to channel his frustrations and prove himself on the court. Every afternoon, rain or shine, Daniel stood by the driveway hoop, rebounding shots and cheering as Marcus practiced his moves. At first, Marcus struggled to fit in with the other kids at school. When he joined the middle school basketball team, some teammates grumbled about having to share the court with him, while opposing players made snide remarks during games, but Marcus refused to let their negativity get to him. Instead, he worked harder than anyone else, staying late after practice to perfect his skills and showing up early for drills. By the end of the season, his talent spoke louder than any insult ever could. He earned a starting position on the team and led them to victory in several key matches. Slowly but surely, respect replaced ridicule, and Marcus found camaraderie among his teammates. Elijah, meanwhile, discovered his own voice through art. His sketches, once hidden away in notebooks, began to take center stage. Daniel noticed how Elijah's drawings captured emotions and stories that words couldn't express. To nurture this gift, Daniel signed him up for art classes at the local community center. At first, Elijah hesitated. He worried that people wouldn't understand his work, or that they'd dismiss it because of who he was. But Daniel encouraged him to keep going, reminding him that creativity didn't need permission to shine. Over time, Elijah gained confidence. His pieces, a vibrant mix of bold colors and intricate details, started winning awards in regional competitions. One painting, titled Home, depicted a small house surrounded by towering trees, with two figures holding hands under a bright sun. It won first prize at a youth art fair, drawing praise from judges and visitors alike. For Elijah, it was proof that his voice mattered, and that people were finally listening. Beyond sports and art, Daniel focused on teaching Marcus and Elijah important life lessons. He wanted them to grow up knowing their worth, no matter what others might say. On weekends, he took them hiking in nearby trails, using the quiet moments to talk about courage, kindness, and standing up for what was right. "You don't have to be mean to be strong," he told them one day as they sat by a stream, skipping stones across the water. "Sometimes being brave means walking away from fights or choosing not to respond to hate. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you smarter." Daniel also made sure to celebrate their heritage. Though he wasn't black himself, he understood the importance of helping Marcus and Elijah connect with their roots. He bought books about African American history, played music by legendary artists like Nina Simone and Stevie Wonder, and introduced them to soul food recipes passed down from friends. They celebrated Juneteenth together, learning about the significance of freedom and resilience. These moments weren't just educational, they were bonding experiences that strengthened their family ties. Despite their progress, challenges still lingered. The town hadn't entirely warmed up to Daniel and his sons. Some neighbors continued to avoid them, while others made passive-aggressive comments whenever they crossed paths. Once, during a neighborhood block party, a woman complimented Daniel on how charitable he was for adopting Marcus and Elijah. Her tone implied that she saw them as charity cases rather than beloved members of his family. Daniel smiled politely, thanked her, and walked away, choosing not to engage. Later that evening, he explained to the boys why her words had been hurtful. "She thinks we're less than her," he said gently. "But she's wrong. We're equal, and we deserve to be treated with dignity. Don't ever forget that." Hardest moments came when Marcus and Elijah faced discrimination head-on. During a high school football game, Marcus overheard a group of parents criticizing the coach for letting him play. Their comments stung, but instead of retaliating, Marcus channeled his anger into the game. He scored the winning touchdown, silencing the critics with his performance. Elijah, too, encountered prejudice when a classmate mocked his artwork, calling it ghetto during an exhibition. Tears welled up in Elijah's eyes, but Daniel reminded him that true art speaks for itself. The following week, Elijah's teacher praised his piece in front of the entire class, turning what could have been a painful memory into a moment of triumph. Through it all, Daniel remained steadfast. He shielded Marcus and Elijah as much as possible, but he also taught them how to stand tall in the face of adversity. He knew he couldn't protect them from everything, nor should he try. What he could do was equip them with the strength and self-belief they needed to thrive, and thrive they did. Marcus became known around school not just for his athletic prowess, but also for his leadership skills. He started mentoring younger students, helping them navigate the same struggles he had faced. Elijah, meanwhile, gained a reputation as a talented artist, whose work inspired others. Together, they proved that their presence in the community wasn't something to be feared or ridiculed. It was something to be celebrated. Even within their own walls, Daniel worked tirelessly to create a safe haven. Their home wasn't fancy, but it was filled with warmth and love. Family movie nights, board game tournaments, and impromptu dance parties became cherished traditions. On Sundays, they cooked big meals together, laughing as flour dusted the countertops and sauce splattered the stove. These moments may have seemed ordinary to outsiders, but to Daniel, Marcus, and Elijah, they were extraordinary. They were proof that happiness didn't come from perfection, it came from connection. As the years went by, subtle changes began to ripple through the town. Some people who had once doubted Daniel's decision started to soften their stance. They saw Marcus scoring goals and leading his team to victory. They admired Elijah's paintings hanging in galleries and libraries. Slowly, begrudgingly, they began to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong about this unconventional family. While not everyone apologized or changed their views, the shift was noticeable. Daniel didn't seek validation from these individuals, but seeing glimpses of acceptance gave him hope. Hope that perhaps, one day, love would truly conquer all. For now, though, Daniel focused on the present. He savored the laughter echoing through the halls, the smell of fresh paint lingering in Elijah's studio, and the sound of sneakers squeaking on the driveway as Marcus practiced his free throws. Life wasn't easy, and it likely never would be. But as long as he had Marcus and Elijah by his side, Daniel knew they could overcome anything. Together they were building something beautiful, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, resilience, and unconditional love. As Marcus and Elijah entered high school, their lives began to change in ways no one could have predicted, not even Daniel. The boys were growing into young men, each carving out his own path while staying deeply connected to the family they had built together. For Daniel, watching them flourish was both a source of immense pride and a reminder of how far they had come since those early days filled with judgment and rejection. Marcus, now a junior, had become the star player on the varsity basketball team. His speed, agility, and sharp shooting skills made him a force to be reckoned with on the court. But what set him apart wasn't just his athleticism, it was his leadership. Coaches praised him for his ability to motivate teammates and opponents, respected him for playing fair even when tempers flared. Off the court, Marcus carried himself with quiet confidence. He didn't shy away from speaking up about racial injustice, often leading discussions in class or at community events. When asked why he chose to use his platform this way, Marcus simply said, "I want people to see me, not just as a basketball player, but as someone who stands for something bigger." Elijah, meanwhile, continued to make waves with his art. By senior year, his work had gained recognition beyond local competitions. One of his paintings, a powerful piece depicting two hands breaking free from chains, was featured in a statewide exhibition. Critics called it bold and moving, noting how it captured themes of struggle and liberation. Elijah's talent earned him scholarships to several prestigious art institutes, including one of the top schools in the country. Though he still felt nervous about stepping into such a competitive world, Elijah knew he had the support of his dad and brother to guide him through. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, life threw an unexpected curveball. During a routine checkup, Daniel received news that would shake their family to its core. He had been diagnosed with early-stage cancer. The doctor assured him it was treatable, but the road ahead would be long and challenging. Daniel kept the diagnosis to himself for a few days, unsure of how to break the news to Marcus and Eleanor. Finally, one evening after dinner, he sat them down in the living room. "I need to tell you both something," Daniel began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "The doctors found something not good. But don't worry, I'm going to fight this, and we're going to get through it together." Marcus and Elijah listened in stunned silence, their faces pale with worry. For a moment, the room felt heavy with fear. Then, without saying a word, Marcus reached over and hugged Daniel tightly while Elijah grabbed his hand. In that instant, Daniel realized he wasn't alone. He never had been. Over the next several months, the family rallied around Daniel. Marcus took on extra responsibilities at home, helping with chores and cooking meals so Daniel could rest. Elijah used his art as a form 以外中断了，请允许我继续完成这个段落。以下是续写内容。Over the next several months, the family rallied around Daniel. Marcus took on extra responsibilities at home, helping with chores and cooking meals so Daniel could rest. Elijah used his art as a form of healing, creating pieces inspired by their journey together. One drawing showed a tree with deep roots, symbolizing strength and resilience. Another depicted three figures standing side by side under a bright sun, representing their unbreakable bond. These artworks became a source of comfort for Daniel, reminding him that his boys were growing into compassionate, thoughtful individuals. Daniel's treatment schedule was grueling, involving rounds of chemotherapy and frequent hospital visits. Yet through it all, Marcus and Elijah refused to let him face it alone. On days when Daniel felt too weak to drive, Marcus accompanied him to appointments, offering words of encouragement during long waits. Elijah brought along sketchbooks to keep Daniel entertained, filling the sterile hospital rooms with color and creativity. Their presence gave Daniel strength, proving that love could lighten even the darkest moments. Meanwhile, the town's attitude toward the Harper family began to shift in subtle yet significant ways. As word spread about Daniel's illness, some neighbors who had once criticized him now offered help. A local church organized a fundraiser to cover medical expenses, and parents who had once mocked Marcus and Elijah volunteered to prepare meals or run errands for the family. While Daniel appreciated these gestures, he couldn't help but feel bittersweet about them. "It shouldn't take something like this for people to see us as human beings," he remarked to Marcus one evening. "You're right," Marcus replied, "but maybe it's a start." Indeed it was. Slowly, the barriers that had once divided the Harpers from the rest of the community began to crumble. People started seeing Marcus and Elijah not as outsiders, but as integral parts of the town. At a charity basketball game held to raise money for Daniel's treatment, Marcus led his team to victory, earning thunderous applause from the crowd. Afterward, several attendees approached Daniel to express admiration for his sons. "They're amazing kids," one woman said sincerely. "You must be so proud." Daniel nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of acceptance. Elijah, too, experienced a newfound sense of belonging. His artwork, which had once been dismissed by some as too different, was now celebrated as a reflection of courage and perseverance. Local businesses began displaying his paintings in their windows, and teachers encouraged younger students to look up to him as a role model. When Elijah delivered a speech at his high school graduation, thanking Daniel for believing in him and teaching him to embrace his identity, the audience erupted into applause. Even those who had doubted Daniel's decision to adopt were moved to tears. Through it all, Daniel remained humble. He never sought praise or recognition. His only goal had always been to provide Marcus and Elijah with a loving home. But as their achievements gained attention, so did his story. Reporters from regional newspapers wrote articles highlighting the family's journey, calling Daniel a hero who defied societal norms to raise two extraordinary young men. Friends and acquaintances who had once distanced themselves reached out to apologize, admitting they had underestimated the Harpers. Some admitted they had been wrong to judge based on appearances or preconceived notions. While Daniel graciously accepted these apologies, he made it clear that forgiveness wasn't what mattered most. What truly mattered was progress, the willingness to learn, grow, and change. "We're all works in progress," he told a neighbor who expressed regret over past behavior. "What's important is that we keep moving forward." By the time Daniel completed his treatment, Marcus and Elijah were preparing for the next chapters of their lives. Marcus had earned a scholarship to play college basketball, while Elijah was packing his bags for art school. Though leaving home was bittersweet, they promised to stay connected, visiting whenever possible and keeping Daniel updated on their adventures. On the day they left, Daniel stood on the porch, waving until their car disappeared down the road. As he turned back inside, he felt a mix of emotions, pride, sadness, and hope. The house felt quieter without the boys, but Daniel knew their absence was temporary. Their voices echoed in every corner. Their laughter still lingered in the air. And though challenges lay ahead, for Daniel adjusting to life post-cancer, for Marcus and Elijah navigating adulthood, they faced them with the same resilience that had carried them through everything else. For Daniel, the turning point came not just in overcoming illness or gaining acceptance from others, but in realizing the profound impact his choices had made. By adopting Marcus and Elijah, he hadn't just given them a home. He had shown the world that family isn't defined by bloodlines or societal expectations. It's defined by love, sacrifice, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves a chance to belong. And as Daniel looked back on their journey, he knew one thing for certain. No matter what the future held, they would continue to stand together as a family forged by choice, strengthened by adversity, and united by love. Years passed, And the Harper family's story continued to unfold in ways that surprised even those who had followed their journey closely. Marcus and Elijah grew into accomplished young men, each carving out a unique place in the world while remaining deeply connected to the family they cherished. Daniel, now in his late 60s, watched with pride as his sons achieved dreams that once seemed impossible, knowing full well how much hard work and resilience it had taken to get there. Marcus thrived in college, not just on the basketball court but also in the classroom. He majored in sociology, driven by a desire to understand the systemic inequalities he had faced throughout his life. On campus, he became a leader among his peers, organizing workshops about racial equality and mentoring younger students who struggled with similar challenges. His teammates admired him not only for his skills but also for his ability to bring people together. By the time he graduated, Marcus had earned more than just accolades for his athletic achievements. He had built a reputation as someone who stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. After graduation, Marcus went on to play professional basketball, fulfilling a dream he had nurtured since childhood. But success didn't change him. Instead of letting fame go to his head, Marcus used his platform to advocate for causes close to his heart. He launched a foundation aimed at providing scholarships and resources to underprivileged youth, particularly children in foster care systems. "I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong," he said during an interview, "but I also know how powerful love and support can be. If we can give kids a chance, they'll surprise us all." The foundation quickly gained traction, earning praise from athletes, activists, and everyday citizens alike. Elijah, meanwhile, made waves in the art world. After graduating from one of the top art institutes in the country, he opened his own gallery, a space dedicated to showcasing works by emerging artists from marginalized communities. His own pieces continued to captivate audiences, blending vibrant colors with raw emotion to tell stories of struggle, hope, and triumph. One of his most famous collections, titled Roots and Wings, explored themes of identity and belonging, drawing inspiration from his childhood experiences. Critics hailed it as groundbreaking, and soon Elijah's name became synonymous with innovation and authenticity. Despite their busy schedules, Marcus and Elijah never forgot where they came from. They visited Daniel regularly, often bringing friends or colleagues home to meet the man who had shaped their lives. For Daniel, these visits were a source of immense joy. Watching his sons interact with others, sharing laughter, wisdom, and warmth, reminded him of why he had chosen this path all those years ago. Even as his health remained fragile after his battle with cancer, Daniel found strength in knowing that his sacrifices had paid off in ways he could have never imagined. Back in the small town where it all began, attitudes toward the Harper family had shifted dramatically. Once ridiculed and ostracized, they were now celebrated as local heroes. People marveled at Marcus's leadership and generosity, praising him for using his fame to make a difference. Elijah's artwork adorned the walls of businesses, schools, and community centers, serving as a reminder of the power of creativity and perseverance. Slowly but surely, the same neighbors who had once mocked Daniel's decision to adopt 2 black boys began to see the error of their ways. Some reached out directly, apologizing for their past behavior. A woman who had once whispered cruel comments at church invited Daniel to coffee, expressing regret for her ignorance. "I didn't understand back then," she admitted. "But seeing how Marcus and Elijah turned out, it makes me realize how wrong I was." Another neighbor, a father whose son had played against Marcus in high school, wrote a heartfelt letter acknowledging how his own prejudices had blinded him to the boy's talents and character. These apologies weren't easy for Daniel to hear. They stirred up memories of pain and rejection. But he accepted them graciously, knowing that growth often begins with admitting mistakes. The turning point came when the town decided to honor Daniel and his sons with a special ceremony. It was held in the same community center where Elijah had taken his first art class, now transformed into a vibrant celebration of the Harper's legacy. Friends, neighbors, and even former critics gathered to pay tribute to the family who had taught them the true meaning of love and acceptance. Marcus delivered a speech thanking everyone for their support while reminding them of the importance of embracing diversity. "We're stronger when we stand together," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "And we owe it to future generations to create a world where no child feels unwanted or unloved." Elijah followed with a slideshow of his artwork, each piece accompanied by a story about its inspiration. When he showed Home, the painting of a house surrounded by trees, he explained how it represented the family he and Marcus had built with Daniel. "This isn't just a picture," he said softly. "It's a promise that no matter where life takes us, we'll always have a place to belong." The audience erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. For Daniel, the ceremony was overwhelming, in the best possible way. As he looked out at the crowd, he saw faces that had once judged him now filled with admiration and respect. He thought about the long, difficult road they had traveled, the loneliness, the ridicule, the moments of doubt, and realized how far they had come. Yet, despite the recognition, Daniel remained humble. In his closing remarks, he reminded everyone that their journey wasn't about fame or validation. "What matters most," he said, "is the love we share and the choices we make every day to lift each other up. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by the bonds we create and the lives we touch." As the evening drew to a close, Daniel reflected on the lessons he had learned along the way. He had started this journey hoping to give Marcus and Elijah a better life. But in doing so, he had discovered something profound. Love has the power to transform not just individuals but entire communities. The same town that had once rejected him now embraced him as one of their own, proving that change is possible when hearts are open and minds are willing to grow. Still, Daniel knew the fight wasn't over. While progress had been made, there were still battles to be fought, not just in their town but across the world. Prejudice and discrimination wouldn't disappear overnight, but he believed that stories like theirs could inspire others to take action. That night, as he sat on the porch watching the stars, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together, as a family united by love, strengthened by adversity, and bound by a shared commitment to making the world a better place. And though the road had been anything but easy, Daniel couldn't imagine choosing any other path. After all, it was through love and sacrifice that he had found his greatest purpose, building a family that proved time and again that nothing, not fear, not hate, not even the weight of societal expectations, could break the ties that bind us. As the years rolled on, Daniel Harper grew older, his hair streaked with silver and his steps slower than they used to be. But despite the toll of age and his earlier battle with cancer, his spirit remained as strong as ever. The bond he shared with Marcus and Elijah had only deepened over time, becoming a source of strength for all three of them. Together they had weathered storms that would have broken lesser families, emerging not just intact but stronger, proof that love could conquer even the harshest trials. Marcus's career in professional basketball reached new heights. He became known not only for his skills on the court, but also for his tireless advocacy work off it. His foundation, which started as a small initiative to help foster children, blossomed into a nationwide movement. It provided scholarships, mentorship programs, and safe spaces for kids who had been overlooked by society. Marcus traveled across the country, speaking at schools, community centers, and conferences, sharing his story and encouraging others to believe in themselves. "I didn't get here alone," he often said during these talks. "I had a dad who saw me when no one else did. And now, I want to be that person for someone else." Elijah, too, continued to make waves in the art world. His gallery became a hub for creativity and conversation, attracting visitors from all walks of life. One of his most ambitious projects was a traveling exhibition called Bridges, which featured collaborative works created by artists from diverse backgrounds. Each piece told a story of connection, of lives intersecting, cultures blending, and communities coming together. The exhibition toured major cities, sparking dialogues about unity and understanding. Critics hailed Elijah as a visionary, but he remained humble, always crediting his family for inspiring him. My art is my voice, he once explained in an interview. And my voice exists because I grew up in a home where I was taught to speak up, not just for myself, but for others. Despite their demanding schedules, Marcus and Elijah made it a priority to stay connected to Daniel. They called him regularly, sent photos of their adventures, and visited whenever they could. On holidays, they returned home to the house where they had grown up, filling it with laughter and memories. For Daniel, these moments were priceless. Sitting around the kitchen table, sharing stories and meals, reminded him of how far they had come, and how much they still had to look forward to. One summer, Marcus and Elijah surprised Daniel with a gift, a trip to a coastal town where Daniel had always dreamed of visiting. They rented a cozy cabin overlooking the ocean, spending their days fishing, hiking, and simply enjoying each other's company. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the three of them sat on the porch watching the waves crash against the shore. "You know," Daniel said, breaking the peaceful silence, "when I adopted you two, I never imagined we'd end up here. I just wanted to give you a chance, a real shot at happiness." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "But what you've given me, it's more than I ever hoped for. You've shown me what it means to live with purpose, to fight for something bigger than yourself. I'm so proud of you both." Marcus and Elijah exchanged glances before leaning in to hug their father tightly. "We wouldn't be here without you, Dad," Marcus said firmly. "You gave us everything, the love, the guidance, the courage to keep going. We owe you everything." Elijah nodded, adding, "And we'll spend the rest of our lives making sure you know how much you mean to us." The trip marked a turning point for the family. Inspired by their conversations, Marcus and Elijah decided to honor Daniel in a lasting way. Together they established the Daniel Harper Foundation, named after the man who had defied societal norms to build a family rooted in love and acceptance. The foundation aimed to support adoptive families, particularly those bridging racial and cultural divides, offering resources, education, and financial assistance. Its motto, "Family is Love," reflected the philosophy that had guided the Harpers through every challenge they faced. News of the foundation spread quickly, drawing attention from media outlets and organizations across the globe. Articles praised Daniel for his selflessness and vision, while interviews with Marcus and Elijah highlighted their dedication to carrying on his legacy. People began reaching out. Adoptive parents seeking advice, children hoping to find forever homes, and advocates eager to join the cause. Through it all, Daniel remained modest, insisting that the credit belonged to his sons. "They're the ones doing the hard work now," he told a reporter during one interview. "I just planted the seed. They're the ones nurturing it into something beautiful." As Daniel entered his 70s, his health began to decline. Though he remained active, attending fundraisers and community events, there were days when fatigue caught up with him. Marcus and Elijah took turns staying with him, ensuring he was comfortable and cared for. On weekends, they gathered around the fireplace, flipping through old photo albums and reminiscing about their journey. These quiet moments became some of the most cherished of Daniel's life, reminding him of the joy and fulfillment he had found in being a father. When Daniel passed away peacefully in his sleep one winter morning, the entire town mourned his loss. Friends, neighbors, and strangers alike attended his memorial service, paying tribute to the man who had changed their perspectives and touched countless lives. Speakers included Marcus and Elijah, who delivered heartfelt eulogies celebrating their father's unwavering love and resilience. "He taught us that family isn't about bloodlines or skin color," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "It's about choosing to stand by someone no matter what, and we'll carry that lesson with us forever." Elijah followed, holding up a framed copy of his painting, Home. "This was Dad's favorite piece," he said softly, "because it wasn't just art. It was us, a family built on love, trust, and hope. And though he's gone, his spirit lives on in everything we do." In the years that followed, Marcus and Elijah dedicated themselves fully to the Daniel Harper Foundation, expanding its reach and impact. They partnered with schools, adoption agencies, and advocacy groups to promote inclusivity and break down barriers. Their efforts inspired a new generation of families, proving that love knows no boundaries. Meanwhile, the town where it all began transformed into a beacon of acceptance, with residents working tirelessly to ensure that no child felt unwanted or unseen. Though Daniel was no longer physically present, his influence lingered everywhere, in the smiles of children finding homes, in the artworks displayed in galleries, in the cheers echoing from basketball courts. His legacy lived on not just in the achievements of his sons, but in the countless lives they touched along the way. Through love, sacrifice, and determination, Daniel Harper had redefined what it meant to be a family, and in doing so, he had left behind a world that was brighter, kinder, and more united than before. And as Marcus and Elijah stood side by side, continuing the work their father had started, they knew one thing for certain. Daniel's greatest gift hadn't been the life he gave them. It had been the example he set. An example of courage, compassion, and unconditional love. An example that would inspire generations to come.